Why do you think we departed?
I was preaching in a Korean church in Dallas, Texas a few years ago, and Korean believers are very intense usually. They have the largest missions movement outside the United States of any country. And after I preached there, I had lunch with a bunch of the leaders of that Korean church, and I said, you know, guys, I am so impressed with the vibrant Christian faith in Korea. Mm-hmm. They said, well, don't be too impressed because it's really cooling off. I said, why? And they said, for the same reason the church here in the United States is cooling off, materialism. If you have all the money you need, you don't need God. And that's why Jesus said, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Why? Because I think money feeds my ego, my pride. It feeds my self-sufficiency, my feeling of autonomy. And I don't need you. I don't need God. I don't need anybody. I'm a self-sufficient, autonomous, all-American. And that's a very dangerous path to walk down spiritually. I'm afraid that our culture has gone down that path, and therefore God is irrelevant, and science and money, that's the way we're going to go.
Yeah. When would you say it was a time where our faith in Jesus was something where, you know, a president maybe even would get up and be thankful and maybe even pray, and it was an open discussion where we were comfortable with it and we were praying in school, and it wasn't a big deal to pray in school, maybe even take Bibles to school. We would even read from it sometimes. When did that stop and why? Because I know you're saying materialism. I get that. But materialism is on the other end of those who defend the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the values and principles that this country was founded on, right? One has to agree to make it secular. Who was that? When did it happen? What was the reasoning why we shifted away from God?
Well, after speaking on campuses for 42 years, what I have observed is a growth in moral relativism. And that growth in moral relativism has gotten to the point today where choice is often God. And don't you dare tell me what I'm going to choose. My choice is my business, and choice is God. And that defines then, it misdefines freedom as being, I do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it. And don't you or God or anybody else tell me what to do, because that's the antithesis of freedom. So there's a misdefinition of freedom, and yet it's very attractive to me as a human being, because I love to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And God, I don't want you telling me what to do. I want to determine that.
So, okay, so we got materialism as one. You got choice is our God. I get to do whatever I get to do. You don't tell me anything. It's my choice. And, how much of that is, phases that a kid goes through where they become a teenager and they're kind of like, don't tell me what to do. I know what I'm doing. You know what? I realize that you don't know what you're talking about. All you care about is this and all these things that you have. And then eventually, 10 years later, it's that 3 phases of father-son relationship goes through where you first idolize, then you demonize, then you humanize. And you're like, you know what? My dad is a human being like me. Shit, I actually like this guy. My God, I've been pretty bad to the guy the last 10 or 15 years, right? Do you think a population or a generation is going through that where they're convincing everybody else that they're right because there's so many of them and they have access to this tool called social media that everybody else is saying, if this person here, this 16-year-old kid got 17 million views, she must know more than I do about God and she must be right. Do you think it's the rebellious phase we're going through where it's just a phase? Or do you think this could be permanent and it's a direction we'll end up staying at?
Well, I pray we're not going to stay there.
Okay.
But relativism has definitely grown. And the illustration I often use is, if the professor at the beginning of a semester says to the students, you're going to be taking tests and I'm going to be grading these tests. And then he pauses and says, but wait a second, do you think truth is relative? And everybody raises their hand and says, oh yes, truth is relative. And he says, fine, when I grade your tests, I'm going to grade them according to height. And everyone goes, whoa. And he says, the tall people are going to get the Fs, and the shortest people are going to get As. And everyone erupts by saying, oh, that's not fair. That's not fair. He says, wait a second. You told me everything's relative. If everything's relative, there's no such thing as fairness as an objective value. It's all relative. Well, it's that type of thinking that people have adopted. You can't live it out. Because if everything is relative, then the pedophile and the victim of the pedophile are equal. And there's really no difference because it's all relative. We can't live that out. So hopefully at some point we're going to realize, because we have consciences and rational minds, this moral relativism that we've bought is bankrupt, and it's leading to total chaos. I'm not surprised by what's going on in Washington, D.C. I'm not surprised by the animosity in our culture today. It's a logical result of relativism. If you and I are just hunks of primordial slime evolved to a higher order, then I can denigrate you because you had the audacity to disagree with me, and my opinion is king. So it makes a lot of sense where we are now, unfortunately. I root so much of it in moral relativism. And I'm sorry, the 10 Commandments are not the 10 suggestions. They're God saying, I'm sorry, human beings have innate value, so you don't lie to people. You don't steal their property. You don't murder them. You don't covet what they have. Instead, you learn to thank God for what they have, and you thank God for what you have. And I think you've got a great definition I saw on the wall there about gratitude and being grateful for what God has given you. Yeah, well, that's foundational to an accurate view of life and of people.